There's a moment in every empire's collapse when the king refuses to see the cracks beneath his throne. He keeps smiling, keeps waving, keeps pretending the walls aren't shaking. But the numbers don't lie. The streams don't lie. And right now, something is happening to Drake that nobody, not even his most loyal believers, can explain away anymore. His first week sales just crashed to a level so low, so embarrassing, so unimaginable for a man who once ruled the entire genre, that even his own fanbase has gone into full meltdown mode. And instead of looking in the mirror, instead of asking the hard questions, they're doing what they always do. They're pointing at one name, one man, one ghost that won't leave their heads. Kendrick Lamar. And the more they scream his name, the more obvious it becomes that the man they claim doesn't matter is the only person still living rent-free in every conversation they have. Welcome back, family. You're tuned into this channel, and trust me, you do not want to blink during this one because what you're about to hear is not just a story about sales numbers. It's a story about ego, denial, a $500 million contract that slipped through someone's fingers, and a cult-like fanbase that has officially lost the plot. Let me set the scene for you, because the picture is wilder than anyone is admitting on the surface. Drake just dropped not one, not two, but a flood of new material, and the numbers came back looking like a heartbeat monitor flatlining in a hospital room. Combined first-week album sales fell to record lows.
Not a small dip.
Not a soft landing. We're talking historic, generational, jaw-on-the-floor lows for an artist who used to break records the way most people break a sweat. And the very moment those numbers hit the timeline, the entire Drake fanbase didn't sit down and reflect. They didn't ask why. They didn't question the music. They didn't question the rollout. They didn't question the constant subliminal warfare that's been turning every album into a diss tape with a tracklist.
No.
They went straight for Kendrick. Again. As if Kendrick is sitting somewhere with a remote control, lowering Drake's streams in real time. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about where this fight has truly gone. Because here's the brutal truth nobody in that camp wants to say out loud. Drake didn't lose this round to Kendrick. Drake lost this round to Drake. Yes, the battle was real, and yes, Kendrick walked away with a victory so clean that even history books are going to footnote it. But that's not what tanked these numbers. What tanked these numbers is what came after. The pettiness. The endless shots. The refusal to move on. The mid-music dressed up in expensive packaging. The rollouts that felt more like a vendetta than a body of work. Drake didn't get dethroned by a rival. He got dethroned by his own reflection. And the funny thing is, his fans see it too. They just can't admit it. Because admitting it would mean admitting that the machine they worship is rusting from the inside out. Now, let's talk about the part that should be sending shockwaves through the entire industry. DJ Academics, of all people, came out with a clip claiming that Drake's arrogance personally cost him an $800 million deal in the middle of his negotiations with Universal. $800 million. Read that number again slowly. That's not a paycheck. That's not a contract. That's generational, dynasty building, name on a building money. And according to the report, Drake was so confident, so puffed up, so sure he was about to walk out of that boardroom carrying a number bigger than $500 million, that he decided in the middle of that negotiation to go pick a rap battle. Not just any rap battle. The biggest one of his career. Against the one man who had been quietly sharpening his sword for over a decade. And in the same breath, his own legal team would later claim in a lawsuit that Drake allegedly knew the label was conspiring against him. So let me get this straight. You knew the house was rigged, you knew the dealer was crooked, and you still walked up to the table, slapped down your stack, and yelled, "All in on red?" That's not confidence. That's a man treating his own career like a casino chip. Pause for a second, family, because I need you to understand something deep before we go any further. If you're rocking with this channel, if you're feeling the energy, if you're tired of surface-level takes and you want the real layered breakdowns, do me one small favor. Tap that subscribe button and hit that like. It's free, it takes a second, and it's the move that keeps this channel growing into the home for unfiltered hip-hop commentary. Now back to the story, because it's about to get even crazier. Think about the psychology of that moment. Drake is sitting across from Universal executives. The room is heavy. The pen is hovering over paper. $800 million is sitting on the table like a glass of water nobody's allowed to touch. And in his head, he's not thinking about security. He's not thinking about ownership. He's not thinking about the long game. He's thinking about Kendrick. He's thinking about pride. He's thinking about proving a point. And the moment he chose pride over paper, the moment he picked ego over equity, that's the moment the empire started shaking. Because here's the universal law of business that nobody escapes. People will tolerate your arrogance only while you're winning. The second the winning stops, the tolerance evaporates faster than a Toronto winter sunset. And Drake learned that lesson in real time. Now, let's talk about the fanbase, because this is where the story becomes almost comedy. The same fans who, just months ago, were screaming that numbers don't matter, that streams are fake, that sales are a corporate metric, are suddenly bringing up numbers like they're reading a Wall Street report. And the moment Drake's own numbers crash through the floor, they switch back to numbers don't matter. It's a level of cognitive whiplash that should require a neck brace. And the irony? They were the ones who weaponized numbers in the first place. They were the ones who built Drake's entire identity around being the biggest, the most streamed, the most charted. So when those very numbers turn around and slap the throne, they have nowhere to hide. They built the cage. They locked themselves inside it. And now they're screaming at the bars wondering how they got there. Let me show you how delusional it's gotten. There's a comment circulating where a Drake fan is screaming that Kendrick fans were botting all over town. Then in the next breath, you see organized streaming parties, fans literally begging Nicki Minaj's Barbs to come help boost the streams, coordinated playlists, and behavior so suspicious that even casual observers are raising eyebrows. If your project is truly that powerful, if the music is truly that strong, why are you out here building a stream army like it's a military operation? You don't need to manufacture momentum when momentum is real. You only build that scaffolding when the building can't stand on its own. And that's what we're watching right now. A skyscraper held together by tape, prayers, and projection. Then comes the comparison nobody asked for. A Drake fan dares to drag LeBron into the conversation, as if Drake's career trajectory has anything to do with the Kings. That's not a flex. That's a flare gun shot straight into the night sky, signaling to the world how out of touch the fanbase has become. Because LeBron, love him or hate him, never collapsed under the weight of one rival. He adapted. He evolved. He never spent years trying to convince the world that the man who beat him didn't exist. Drake, on the other hand, has spent every waking moment since that battle whispering Kendrick's name into every microphone he can find. For a man who claims he doesn't know a single Kendrick lyric, it's astonishing how many of his songs sound like they were highlighted from Kendrick's notebook. Song titles, references, sly jabs, structural choices. It's everywhere. Like a man trying to forget an ex by writing her name on every wall in his house. And here's the punchline that hits harder than any diss track. Kendrick Lamar hasn't said a single word in months. Not one. He's gone silent like a sniper who's already taken the shot and walked away from the rifle. Meanwhile, Drake is still talking, still subbing, still dropping music that sounds like a man arguing with a ghost in his own kitchen. So tell me who really won. Because the man at peace is the one with nothing left to prove, and the man at war is the one who hasn't realized the war is over. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this is where the investigative layer gets thick. Drake suffered the largest Day 2 stream falloff of any major rapper this year. Not a small slip. The largest. And that statistic alone should set off every alarm in the building. Because Day 2 tells you the truth that Day 1 hides. Day 1 is curiosity. Day 1 is hype. Day 1 is people clicking play just to see if their favorite rapper finally said something worth defending. But Day 2? Day 2 is loyalty. Day 2 is replay value. Day 2 is the music actually living inside the listener's daily life. And when Day 2 collapses, it means the music didn't survive the night. It means people listened, shrugged, and moved on. And no amount of streaming parties can revive a project that didn't earn its second sunrise. There's something deeply revealing about this pattern. A lot of casuals tuned in just to see if Drake was going to throw more shots. They weren't there for the artistry. They weren't there for the love of the music. They were there for the drama. And once they realized the drama was just recycled energy aimed at a man who isn't even responding anymore, they checked out. Even his most ride-or-die fans are admitting privately, in scattered corners of the internet, that they haven't finished the project. They started it, got bored, and never returned. That's not a fanbase. That's an audience holding the door open hoping someone gives them a reason to stay. Now let's circle back to that $800 million deal, because the layers underneath it are wild. Reports suggest Drake initially asked for around $600 million, but as his confidence ballooned, so did the number. He pushed it to $800 million. And here's the chilling part. If he had won that rap battle, if he had actually buried Kendrick the way his fans believed he would, that number was going to climb even higher. He would have walked out demanding $1 billion. Maybe more. Because in his mind, victory equals leverage. And leverage equals price tag. But the universe doesn't reward arrogance unmatched by results. The universe collects receipts. And when Drake lost that battle, the leverage didn't just shrink. It vanished. The label that was once ready to write him a generational check suddenly remembered how to play hardball. And just like that, the $800 million became a memory. Now suddenly we're seeing fans float around new numbers. 5 billion. 10 billion. Wild. Fantasy tier valuations being thrown out like confetti. And the question every rational person should be asking is simple. What changed? What new asset did Drake acquire between the failed $800 million deal and these mythical billion-dollar headlines? Nothing. The music isn't stronger. The cultural standing isn't higher. The stock, by his own admission in his own lawsuit, has fallen. So, where exactly is this avalanche of money supposed to come from? The truth is, it isn't coming. It's a fantasy designed to soothe a wounded fanbase that can't process the reality of their hero losing leverage in real time. And let's be honest about something else. If Drake is signing a new deal, whether it's with Sony or anywhere else, the value of that deal is going to depend almost entirely on his older catalog. Not the new music. Not the recent projects that nobody's quoting 2 weeks after release. The old stuff.
Take Care.
Nothing was the same. Views.
Scorpion.
Those albums are the crown jewels. Those are the records that built the empire. And those are the records that any serious label is going to want their hands on. The music he's making now? It's not warranting a $10 billion conversation. It's barely warranting a Twitter thread the day after release. And that's a brutal sentence to type, but it's the truth. Family, real quick, if you're still here with me, if these breakdowns are hitting different, smash that subscribe button right now and join this channel family. We don't just react. We investigate.
We dig.
We expose the layers nobody else is talking about. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's keep building this community together. Now back into the war zone, because it's about to get even hotter. Let's talk about the OVO question, because this is something nobody wants to address honestly. Drake has spent years branding himself as the ultimate A&R, the man who can spot a star from a mile away, the gatekeeper of new talent. But when you actually look at the OVO roster with clear eyes, the receipts don't match the reputation. Most of the artists associated with him got their bumps through features, not through development. He didn't build them from the ground up. He hopped on records when they already had momentum. He attached himself to waves that were already swelling. That's not artist development. That's surfboard riding. And there's nothing wrong with riding waves, but don't call yourself the ocean when you're really just the surfer.
Take Migos, for example.
Migos were going to be Migos with or without Drake. Their sound, their chemistry, their cultural pull, none of it required a cosign. The Versace remix didn't make Migos. Migos made Versace. The relationship was mutually beneficial, sure, but the narrative that Drake broke them is one of those convenient stories that gets repeated so many times it starts to sound true. Same with the Kendrick and A$AP Rocky tour years ago. Yes, Drake brought them along, but think about what that did for him. He got to stand next to two of the most respected artists of that era, absorbing their credibility through proximity. Association is a powerful drug, and Drake has always known how to inject it directly into his brand. And then there's the Molly Santana situation, which is comedic on a whole other level. Reports surfaced that Drake didn't even know who she was until his own son had to brief him. Let that sink in. The man branded as the ultimate A&R, the supposed king of curation, needed his child to update him on who the next big thing was. That's not curation. That's catching up. And it perfectly illustrates the gap between the legend and the reality. The legend says Drake hears the future before anyone else. The reality says Drake hears about the future after his kid does. Now, let's pivot to something that should make every Drake stan uncomfortable. Kendrick Lamar may have a new album dropping this year. Poly Market Odds, which is essentially a prediction market where people bet real money on real outcomes, has the probability sitting at nearly 70%. And the moment that news started circulating, you could feel the temperature in the room shift. Because for all the talk, for all the shade, for all the manufactured confidence, the truth is the entire culture is holding its breath waiting for Kendrick's next move. Nobody waits like this for an artist they consider irrelevant. Nobody bets money on the timing of an album by someone they claim doesn't matter. The market reveals what people actually believe, even when their words say otherwise. And right now, the market is screaming that Kendrick is still the gravity center of this culture. Meanwhile, Drake's camp is pushing the narrative that he's about to sign with Sony, that he's going independent, that he's flexing on the industry. But here's the thing about independence. Real independence means owning your masters. Real independence means controlling your distribution. Real independence means walking away with your catalog intact. And if Drake is signing a multi-billion-dollar deal that requires him to hand over his most successful work, that's not independence. That's the most expensive collar in music history. For a man who has built so much of his recent talking points around complaining about ownership, walking into another deal that compromises ownership would be the ultimate hypocrisy. But that's where this story might be heading. And his fans will defend it anyway, because that's what they do. They build statues out of contradictions. Let me share something that puts all of this into sharper focus. There are reports that Drake has actually owned his masters since 2019, with his music being licensed to Universal as a distributor under a 90-10 profit split. That's an extraordinary arrangement for an artist of his stature, and it shows that for years, the machinery was tilted heavily in his favor. So when fans cry that Universal owns everything, that he's some oppressed artist trapped in corporate chains, the math doesn't add up. He's been profiting massively. The label was a distributor, not a captor. But narratives are more comfortable than facts, especially when those narratives let you play the victim instead of facing the truth that the empire is wobbling because of internal decisions, not external sabotage. And here's the part that hits like a body blow. The reason the stadium tour conversations never materialized into reality is because the demand isn't matching the legend. 11,000 pure sales in a first week is the kind of number that doesn't fill stadiums. It fills theaters. Maybe arenas if you're lucky, but not stadiums. Stadiums require cultural urgency, the kind of urgency that makes people empty their bank accounts at 3 a.m. when pre-sale links drop. And right now, Drake's urgency is leaking faster than anyone in his camp wants to admit. Compare that to Kendrick, who actually went to Mexico, who actually performed in markets that most rappers are terrified of touching. I've spoken to promoters down there who told me straight up that they don't even bother booking most rappers because the sellouts are so slow and the seats so empty that it's not worth the risk. Argentina, similar story. There's a reason certain artists avoid those stages. They know the truth waiting for them under those bright lights. They know how brutal those rows of empty seats look when the spotlight hits. But Kendrick walked into those venues and shut them down. He went where others were afraid to go and turned skepticism into roaring crowds. That's not just an artistic flex. That's a cultural one. That's the kind of global resonance that doesn't show up in streaming numbers because it lives in something deeper. Loyalty, belief, movement. And when you have that, you don't need to organize streaming parties. You don't need to beg fan bases to help inflate numbers. The energy carries itself. The audience shows up because they need to, not because they were recruited to. Now here's where the story turns philosophical because we have to ask the bigger question. When did being the biggest stop being enough? When did the chase for numbers swallow the love of the music? Drake spent the last decade building an identity around being the most. The most streams. The most charts. The most plaques. The most everything. And when you build your entire identity around being the most, You've handed your sense of self to a scoreboard. You've outsourced your soul to a statistic. And the day that statistic drops, you don't just lose a record. You lose yourself. That's the identity crisis we're watching in real time. It's not about a battle. It's about a man who tied his worth to numbers and is now watching those numbers betray him on national television. And his fans, bless their loyalty, are experiencing the same crisis by proxy. They built their sense of victory around his numbers. So when the numbers fall, their victory falls with it. And rather than accept the new reality, they invent villains.
Kendrick.
The barbs, ironically. The label. The streaming services. The algorithm. The weather. Anything except the man at the center of the storm. Because to admit that Drake created the situation is to admit that they've been defending a story that was never built on solid ground. And that's a level of self-reflection that most fanbases are simply not equipped for. Let me give you a comparison that might land harder than expected. Imagine a boxing champion who loses a major fight. There are two paths after that loss. Path 1 is the legend's path. You take time off. You retrain. You analyze the loss. You come back leaner, sharper, hungrier. You earn the rematch. You earn the redemption. Path 2 is the cautionary tales path. You refuse to admit the loss happened. You keep throwing punches in the press conference. You make every interview about your old rival. You drop subliminals into every photo, every caption, every interaction. And eventually, the public stops seeing you as a champion in recovery and starts seeing you as a man stuck in a loop. Right now, Drake is in path 2. And every day he stays on it, the door to path 1 closes a little more. There's also the matter of artistic identity, which is the quietest crisis happening underneath all this noise. The Drake of 2011 had an unmistakable sound. The Drake of 2015 had an unmistakable sound. Even the Drake of 2018 had a defined era. But the Drake of today sounds like a man auditioning for himself. The R&B records blur together. The rap records feel reactive instead of proactive. The features feel like favors instead of moments. And song titles? Some of them sound like they were generated by a website. Xiong sounds less like a track title and more like an energy drink you'd buy at a gas station off a foreign highway. No creativity. No swagger. No identity. Just content. And content without identity is the loudest form of silence. Here's a brutal observation. Even his most loyal supporters are not quoting bars from these projects. They're not running back specific lines. They're not making the songs go viral on TikTok. They're not building memes around the music itself. They're only quoting numbers. They're only quoting alleged business deals. They're only quoting industry whispers. Notice the pattern? The conversation has officially moved away from the music. And when the conversation moves away from the music has already died. It just hasn't been buried yet. Now, let me bring something deeper into focus. There's a story circulating that Drake allegedly bought Michael Jackson's used underwear. I'm not making this up. It's actually out there. And whether you believe it or not, the existence of the story itself tells you something about where his public image has drifted. We've gone from comparisons to greatness to comparisons to memorabilia obsession. From legacy talk to oddity talk. And his fans, instead of pumping the brakes, eat every story up. They consume content about him at a level that borders on devotional, regardless of how strange or unflattering the angle. That's not fandom. That's something else entirely. Something heavier. Something harder to break free from. And here's the dramatic irony hanging over all of this. Drake once compared himself to Michael Jackson. He wanted that lineage. He wanted that energy. And in a strange, almost poetic way, the comparison may have caught up with him in ways he didn't expect. Not the global icon part, not the moonwalk magic part, but the tragic part, the misunderstood part, the empire-cracking part. There's a curse in chasing the throne of the king of pop because the throne comes with its own ghosts. And right now, those ghosts seem to be settling in. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention. The shelf life of music. A great album doesn't peak on release week. A great album grows. It seeps into culture. It gets quoted at weddings, at funerals, at protests, at parties. It survives the algorithm because the people refuse to let it go. Kendrick's catalog has that shelf life. Drake's recent catalog does not. And the proof is in the silence. Outside of one or two records, like that Janice cut that briefly trended, almost nobody is discussing this music a couple of weeks after release. There's no replay culture. There's no quoting culture. There's no anniversary energy waiting in the wings. There's just a release date, a debate, and a fade. And artists don't survive long when their music has the lifespan of a news cycle. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us at a crossroads that Drake himself has to navigate. He can keep dropping music drenched in subliminals at a man who isn't even responding. He can keep flooding the market with projects that don't survive the week. He can keep letting his fanbase build castles in the sky out of imaginary billion-dollar deals. Or he can do the one thing that takes the most courage in the entire industry. He can pause. He can reflect. He can rebuild. He can return to the version of himself that the world fell in love with in the first place, before the comparisons, before the numbers, before the obsession with a man whose silence is currently louder than every song on his last 3 projects combined. But here's the part that should rattle every reader. The longer he waits, the harder that return becomes. Because audiences are loyal until they're not. Audiences will defend you, scream for you, build temples for you, until one day they wake up and realize they don't feel anything anymore. And once that feeling dies, no marketing budget on earth can resurrect it. Just ask the dozens of artists who used to dominate the radio and now can't book a college tour. The fall isn't loud. The fall is silent. The fall is people scrolling past your new release without clicking. The fall is your name disappearing from the group chats. The fall is the algorithm quietly dimming your light. And every sign right now suggests Drake is in the early hours of that fall, even if his fans are still pretending it's morning. Now let's bring it home, because the meaning underneath this whole saga is bigger than one rapper, bigger than one beef, bigger than one $800 million deal that slipped through a king's fingers. This is a story about what happens when ego outgrows ability. This is a story about what happens when a man stops competing with the world and starts competing with one ghost in his own head. This is a story about what happens when you let pride write the contract that talent was supposed to sign. And it's also a story about us, the audience, because we're watching it in real time. We're choosing whether to keep clapping for the spectacle or whether to demand something deeper from the artists we elevate. Every stream is a vote. Every replay is a vote. Every silence is a vote, too. And right now, the silence is starting to vote louder than the applause. If you've ridden with me all the way to this point, you already know what time it is. This is the kind of breakdown you won't find anywhere else, and this channel is built on conversations exactly like this one. So before you leave, do me one last solid. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the like. Drop a comment with your honest thoughts. And turn on those notifications, because the next video we drop is going to dig into something even bigger, even messier, and even more revealing than what you just heard. You don't want to miss what's coming next.
Trust me on that.
Here's the final thought I want to leave burning in your mind. Drake didn't lose to Kendrick. Drake lost to the version of himself that refused to evolve. Kendrick was just the mirror that finally forced the reflection. And every time his fans scream Kendrick's name in defense of failing numbers, they're not protecting Drake. They're confirming exactly what they're trying to deny. Because if Kendrick truly didn't matter, his name wouldn't be the first one out of their mouths every single time the empire shakes. The man you keep mentioning is the man you secretly know defeated you. And there's no rebrand, no Sony deal, no manufactured billion-dollar headline that can rewrite that truth. Numbers fade. Streams fade. Deals come and go. But the story of how a king lost his crown by chasing a battle he was never supposed to start? That story is going to live forever. And maybe, just maybe, the most haunting part of this entire saga isn't the loss itself. It's the fact that somewhere out there, in a studio nobody can find, behind doors nobody can knock on, Kendrick Lamar is sitting quietly with new music, sharpening blades the world doesn't even know exist yet. The silence isn't peace. The silence is preparation. And when that silence finally breaks, every conversation we've had today is going to feel like a warm-up for the storm that's coming. So stay locked in. Stay sharp. Stay tuned to this channel. because the next chapter of the story hasn't even started yet, and trust me, you're going to want a front row seat when it does.